Hi weaving friends, today we're going to be talking about selling your weaving, why you would sell your weaving, how you can start, and the things that you need to think about before you begin. This video is brought to you by the Online Weaving School. With memberships and single purchase classes, there is something for everyone. Whatever loom you weave on yourself, you will find something for you over at the Online Weaving School. I also have a members only selling for weaving class. If you're really interested in this topic and want to delve in further and you're already a member, all you need to do is look through your class list and you'll find the class under Selling for Weavers. Today's video is a little bit different, maybe a little more relaxed and a little less formal than usual. Not that I'm usually that formal, but I really just wanted to come here today and have a little chat, a little discussion, and share some of my thoughts with you, considering that I've been an online seller of handmade goods for a really long time now. I actually started on Etsy in 2008, and I've sold all kinds of handmade goods. And I have a lot of experience with different products, selling different ways and all of that. So I thought at least some of you would find this an interesting topic to go over. The first aspect that I want to look at is the why. Why would you consider starting to sell your woven goods? There are a few different reasons why. For some people, it is just that you want to cover your yarn costs or your loom costs. Maybe you want to save up for a new loom, some new equipment, whatever it is, and you want to just use the proceeds from your sales to kind of cover that as a hobby. That's a hobby level seller. Another common reason is that you start to end up with too many woven things in your home, more than you know what to do with, and you may have already given a heap of them away as gifts to family and friends and all of that, and still things accumulate. Well, that's only natural because as weavers we're curious, we want to continue to learn, and that means new projects. And the final reason is for someone who's a little more serious, and I definitely fall into this category, although I didn't for the beginning, but someone who actually loves weaving so much that they want to make it their career, or they want to be able to make a living out of it. This is the person who begrudgingly gets up each day to go to their job, and they're thinking as they get out of bed, all I want to do is stay home and weave. So depending on which category you fall into, you are going to have a different approach to when it comes to selling. The hobby level seller is an easy way to kind of ease in without worrying too much, not having the stress of, say, having left a job, having to provide income, and having to have systems in place already by the time you get going. So definitely if you want to approach your selling from a business perspective, you're going to have a more full-on approach than someone who just wants to make a little bit of spare cash for yarn or to see a little bit of return on the investment that they've made. When I first started selling my woven products, and before then for many years I'd been selling other handmade products that I'd made, from hand-dyed yarn to embroideries to handmade dolls, all kinds of things. I really approached it from a hobby level, and I really wanted to, actually one of my main motivations was that I wanted to be able to not just contribute to our family income, but in a very specific way. I wanted to cover my yarn costs, and I wanted to be able to buy homeschool books for our kids. But we did at that time have my husband's income, so there wasn't a real pressure on me to be pulling any kind of income in. It was really just going to be a sort of pocket money kind of situation. That changed over the years, obviously, but that is how I started out. This can be a really awesome way to get into selling, because if you throw yourself headlong into a business right away, that's going to be pretty overwhelming, because what I know today after 5 years after I started the online weaving school, so that's kind of my landmark for getting serious from a business perspective. But what I know now after running this business for 5 years compared to what I knew when I first started is vastly, vastly different. I know so much more now. And if I'd been presented at that time, before I knew all of these things, before I'd had the experience of running the business, I think it would have been fairly overwhelming. So a hobby level, and this can be as simple as selling to your family and friends, charging them, friendly rates if you want to, or charging them more if they're willing to pay that. But being able to do that, so essentially you're selling to people that you already know, that you're comfortable with, and often, very often, they have approached you. So you're not putting any hard sell on them. You're not the salesperson, you're the artist, the creator, and they've come to you because they've admired something, they've seen you wearing a scarf and they love it or something like that, and they want one for themselves. This is how a lot of people get started selling their weaving, and it's just perfect because you do not have that pressure. And you can grow accustomed to transacting with people who are familiar to you rather than strangers that you're trying to attract in. There's one thing I'll say about the hobby level though. What can often happen if someone is selling just from a hobby perspective, so let's say that they've set themselves the goal of covering their yarn costs and they're not really making a profit as such on each item that they sell. This can be an issue for the overall image of the weaving industry, because what you're going to get is you're going to get a mixture of weavers selling, and some of them will be people like me who sell weaving related products, online courses, patterns, etc. is what I sell. But whether you're selling physical or digital items, if a potential customer comes along and maybe they don't know that much about weaving, they don't know that much about the materials, and they see this scarf, let's say this exact same scarf right here that I'm wearing, they see someone selling it for $30, maybe $40, whatever the yarn cost was, I'd have to calculate that. And then they went over and saw somebody else selling the exact same scarf for, I don't know, $180, $200. They, of course, would think, well, why on earth would I pay the higher price for the same product? Or at least a very similar product. The difference between the two is that one person is charging for the labor of the time that they put in to make that scarf, and then the hobby level person just wants their yarn covered. So I think it's a good way to get started, but I don't know whether it's necessarily sustainable. And I think also what could happen to someone who starts out at hobby level, because as weavers we do put so much time and effort and often expensive and beautiful materials as well into our work, eventually you're going to get to a point where you do want to be rewarded for that financially if you're selling. And covering your yarn costs may not make you feel valued enough as a creator. So I did kind of spend a lot of time on that first topic, but I think it's really important to determine what kind of seller you want to be and what your reasons for selling are, because then that determines your next steps. By the way, I do have a blog post that goes along with this video. So if I talk about any mathematical formulas or anything like that, and you want to recap on that, you can head over to the blog and it's all written down for you. But one thing that could sort of hinder you if you begin selling is if you don't have a dedicated space either in your home or in a studio or in a shared space somewhere, whether it's a rented space, whatever it needs to be for you, is you may find that difficult over time if you are building up your selling business and you have to get your materials out all the time and then pack them up at the end of the day. That's a real deterrent to, it kind of puts a stop on the flow of creativity. It's vastly different to if you come into your own space and can just start working and continue working on the things that you've been working on before. Also to have space for, things like packing materials that you're going to need to have possibly if you are selling your hand-woven pieces. Maybe a little workspace for your computer and other things that you're going to need to sort of run your business. Now, until I moved into this studio 15 months ago, I had a very small space in a shared second lounge room of our last house. And that worked out okay, except when I needed to film. That was often difficult because I needed people to actually go out of the house to have enough quiet to be able to film. That's a different thing to making your own products to sell. When I was weaving to sell, it wasn't a problem having the kids around. In fact, it was ideal because I could work while the kids were around me and could attend to both duties. But I had my looms set up and I didn't have to move them. And that little space, even though it was tiny, it was my space and only my things were in it. So that's just something a little bit extra to consider. Time is something really important to think about, because we can often think that we are able to do more than we actually can when we break down the hours. This is especially relevant to those of you who have what I would consider a busy life, working outside of the home or caring for people outside of the home or caring for people within your home. These things don't leave a lot of time once you are finished with those duties for the day, and they often drain you quite a bit of energy. And so the time that you do have that you could be working on things to weave and sell, you may just feel too tired. So have a think about that as well. Think about, if you're really, really serious about wanting to sell your pieces, take a little bit of time, maybe planning, writing things down and seeing how much time do I actually have in each day to dedicate to this, and how am I feeling during that time. If you're dead tired during that time, it can be hard to focus and, make beautiful creative things if you're not feeling your best. Now, I'm definitely not saying it can't be done. Absolutely, it can be done. I started my business whilst homeschooling my kids. They were all younger. They were all with me all day, every day. My husband was out at work. Our lives were very, very different to how they are now. But I managed to do it by fitting in those little blocks of time here and there. And I made it a priority because it was so important to me. This next point kind of ties in with the aspect of time as well, but it's sustainability. And that is, how sustainable do you think it's going to be for you, given your current situation, to be able to produce enough things to sell, to be able to make some income? And again, this comes back to, do you want to do hobby level? Do you want to do business level? But I think there's a kind of romantic view of having a handmade business. I have so many people say to me, oh, you're so lucky and you get to do what you love every day and all of that. And yes, I agree with them. I'm extremely blessed and I love being able to do this. But some people just don't realize what goes into having this kind of business, what actually happens behind the scenes, how much there is to learn as you go along, how much time it can take to do simple things, how much time it takes just to produce some woven articles. Not to mention the photography, the bookkeeping, the shipping, the customer service. I actually spend the majority of my time these days, because people often ask me, how much time do I weave every day? And it's not even an everyday thing. It's more like I spend most of my time on customer administration and administration for the actual business. So when you go into the idea of selling from a business perspective, make sure that you're doing it without the rose-colored glasses. It can be a little bit disappointing for some people to realize that there's a lot more work than they wanted to take on. And a lot of that kind of work is not stuff that might necessarily suit a creative person. For example, recording every single transaction that you have, recording every single thing that you spend money on for the business, doing the quarterly taxes, and then doing the end of year taxes as well. It depends on what country you're in as to how much you'll have to do here. But for me, I do my taxes every quarter, and then at the end of the year, I take the luxury of paying an accountant to do my end of year taxes, just to check over everything and make sure that I've done everything correctly throughout the year. But all of these things, they're not necessarily things that I enjoy or that I would choose to do. Another thing is video editing. It's one of my least favorite things that I do in my business, and yet it's absolutely essential, because without it, I wouldn't be bringing videos like this to you. I wouldn't have the online weaving school. So I guess sometimes you have to think there are things that you're going to have to do that may not necessarily be your thing, and it's not all just fun and games and creativity. All right, now we're going to talk about one of the biggest issues for selling, and that is money. How much are you going to get paid? How are you going to ensure that you get paid an amount that you are satisfied with? Are you going to be able to produce things that will be worth the time and effort that you put in? This is a really tricky one, and sometimes it'll take quite a bit of time for you to build up your audience. And you can think of your audience as like your fans, kind of like you guys, I hope, are for me. And that is that when I put out a video like this, or I put out a new pattern, or I put out a new class, I have a lot of people listening, and most of them have known me for quite a few years, and they like what I do. I've already got that, but it's taken me a long time to build that up. That does take time. And that's going to come into your pricing as well. So a real life example of this would be when I started my weaving school, my prices were super low, like ridiculously low, not sustainable. The reason I did this is because I really didn't believe in myself at the time. I didn't think that I was going to be able to gather enough people around me to be able to make this a profitable business. And if I didn't value myself and the work that I was doing, then I felt why would other people value what I was doing as well? Thankfully, the years have taught me that that's not the case, and my prices are much more reflective of now, I think, the quality of my work and what the weaving school has become. But money's a really tricky thing to talk about, because I think a lot of us have sort of issues with money, and there are a lot of different viewpoints about what is good money, what's not good money, what's rich, what's not rich, all of those things. So what I would say to you is, if you're looking at the profit that you're making or that you would want to make from your weaving, just make sure that you don't feel like you're being ripped off, because your time and your skill is very valuable. And as you go along, your skills will increase. If you're only a newer weaver, then yes, you might need to charge lower prices, because maybe your work is just not quite as high level as it will be once you have some more experience. It can be a useful exercise also to use a sort of calculation formula. And this is not anything set in stone, but it can just be helpful to have you thinking the right way around pricing for your products, in a way that's going to be good for you and good for your customer, and that you just delve into it a little bit more so that you know where the money's coming from, where the money's going, etc. So I first came across pricing formulas quite a few years ago when I was making handmade dolls, and I put an awful lot of time into these dolls. Often I did custom dolls for people. The majority of people really loved their dolls, and then I'd have the odd person who was not satisfied with their doll. And this was really hard to take, because I'd put in so much time, so much effort. I would go out and buy these specific fabrics to make specific clothes for the dolls. I would often knit for them. I'd sew wigs on. It was just so much time and so much effort. And one day I was feeling a little bit lousy about the whole doll thing, thinking, well, it just takes me so long to make one doll, and I'm really not making, I'm not charging very much money for them. So I came across this online formula, and I filled it out, and I was really shocked and a bit dismayed to discover that technically I was making negative $1 per hour. So it was actually, once I extracted my labor from the equation, it was actually costing me more money to make the dolls than it wasn't. And unfortunately, I stopped making dolls after that, because I just couldn't put in that time. It was just too heartbreaking. So if you start out by using a formula, at least then you know where you are, you know what you're actually earning and what your expectations are. So again, this formula is on my blog, and you'll find the link to that down below. I will also, of course, link to any other things that I've mentioned down below as well. Let's go over the formula together. So a basic formula is your supplies cost, whatever materials you've used to make the item, plus the labor, which is your time. Now this one's really subjective because it's going to differ for each person. Some people might say, well, I would love to be paid $10 an hour. And someone else might say, $10 an hour, I'm not working for that. Another person might say, I won't take any less than $50 an hour. There's no right and wrong, it's just your personal preferences, as long as it's realistic and you're going to actually be able to sell your items with those costs considered. And then once you've factored in your labour, you add on another 10% for other costs, for example, fees, packaging, insurance, etc. There are lots of hidden costs in business, whether you are doing a digital business or a physical goods business. I always say to my husband, everyone wants a piece of your pie when you're in business. It's true, but you can see how this formula could work for you because you can take any item. You do need to record your materials so that you actually know how much you spent. And if you paid for shipping to get the materials to you, make sure that you include that amount as well. That's in the overall materials cost. Then add in your labor. So you need to record the time, and this can be as specific or non-specific as you want. You can include all planning time, all writing time, and the time from when you actually start on the project, whenever that is, to the very finish, whenever that is. You can choose on whether you include your wet finishing time, whatever it is. Again, if you're working as a business, to make it profitable, you need to make sure that you are allowing for all of that time that you put in. So now that I've discussed those kind of really beginner things to think about when you are thinking about selling your weaving, there's so much more to it. And I feel like if I continue to sit here and talk about it, this would be a very, very long video. I do enjoy talking about this, and I like working in the business sphere, and I like encouraging other people, especially creative people, to do the same. So if you would like me to do more videos like this, and if you'd like me to get more specific on the topics, please do let me know in the comments down below, and be specific if you can about what topics you need more information about or you would like to know more about. There are a few more points that I just want to touch on today, and then I'm going to finish with what I think is one of the most important aspects of selling your weaving these days. So other things that you need to think about is where you're going to sell. I already touched on selling to family and friends, but you also have online selling, which I think is a really fantastic way to go and way to get started. And you don't have much to lose when you start selling online because it's very cheap and usually very simple to get started. As I already said, I started on Etsy quite a few years ago now, and Etsy has changed an awful lot, and I don't think it's changed for the better. However, having said that, I still think it's a really great place to start because it's a marketplace, and that means that when you list products there, those products are going to be more seen than if you, say, listed them on your own website to begin with, and you didn't have a way to attract people to that website to begin with when you're starting out. So a marketplace type situation is really good. Also, the fees on Etsy, yes, they've gone up a lot in recent years, but still it is a good way to get started as long as you factor those fees and other costs into the total product. I still use Etsy to sell my patterns and my ebooks, and it still works for me. Another thing to think about is your legal and tax requirements. So if you're starting out at hobby level, this is not going to usually be much of an issue. It's when you start generating a bit more income that you really need to be on the ball with what's happening with your country's tax laws. This is something that you really don't want to get caught out with. And so I recommend that even if you're only doing hobby level, have a way that you can record information. And the very basics of the information that you need to record initially are: if you make a sale, write down what it was, write down how much it was. If you buy anything for the business, write down what it was, write down how much it was. And have those going. You can, if you're old school, you can write that in a sort of ledger book. If you like using computers, you can have an online spreadsheet. You can often get free software, easy to use spreadsheets. This is forming good habits for later. If you're income does increase significantly, and then you need to get serious about recording your financials and make sure that everything is above board there, because you really don't want that stress of having the government say, okay, show us what you've been doing, and you don't have the information ready at hand. I think I need to mention copyright as well, because there are still a lot of people out there, and I've tried to sort of educate people on this and how you need to be careful and be aware of copyright issues. But there's still a lot, and I think it's to do with the internet really, is because people are sharing stuff on the internet all of the time. A lot of the time there's no original source for where that particular photo or phrase or whatever it is came from. And so you can't, and so copyright infringements happen a lot. But if you're going to be selling, it's your responsibility to know what you are and are not allowed to do. I've written an article about copyright. That's on my blog. I'll leave the link to that down below so that you can have a look. It's not really heavy information. It's just to say, hey, you know, you kind of need to know this stuff before dipping your toes in. An example would be if you wanted to use someone's pattern that they had sell commercially, to make an item to sell. That's going to differ very much from each creator. So say in my case, if you buy a pattern of mine, I stipulate in the pattern that you are allowed to make and sell items that are exactly the same as the pattern, and there's no limit on the number that you can do, but you do need to acknowledge me as the original author of that design. Other pattern designers might have different stipulations. For example, they might say you can sell up to 10 of this piece, giving attribution to them. Another one will say for personal use only, you must not sell items pertaining to this pattern. And most importantly, you must not reproduce a pattern that you have bought and sell it, resell it yourself. Yes, this happens. People have done it to me. They've purchased my pattern or my class, and then they've set up their own website and they try and sell the pattern for a cheaper price. Big, big no-no. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. It's not classy. And there are enough people out there who actually want you to succeed if you're selling your weaving. Like me, I want you to succeed. If you want to use one of my patterns and give me attribution, then you can do that as much as you like, because ultimately I want you to be able to succeed in what you want to do. The very last thing I want to talk about today, and this you could consider is my little nugget of gold at the end of this session for you, because I think this is the most important thing, particularly for online selling, but also for in-person selling, shipping your things out to people. And that is to have a mailing list. If you're not really sure what that is, it's very simple. You, as the creator, the designer, the maker, whatever you are, you have a place where people can come and they can join up your mailing list by using their email. And then you have a way to contact them. And this is an essential part of growing an audience, especially in today's climate where so many people use the internet, use email. I started out my original mailing list on MailChimp many, many years ago, and I now use Convertkit. And I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of what Convertkit does for me, but it does a lot and it allows me to automate a lot. So in the long run, it's less work for me, but it also means that I can collect people's email addresses and then I can send out emails to them. I can let them know about new products. I can let them know about new free content that I have. It's just such a valuable tool to have. Currently, as a general rule, I send out about 1 email a week to my audience, and that's usually in the form of like a weekend newsletter where I can collect all the different things that I've been doing and share that with my audience. But also if I have a new product, I may promote that, and so I may send up to maybe 3 emails a week, no more than that. And that's kind of a rarer occasion. Usually I like to stick to the 1 because I know that people are busy and they don't want to be bothered all the time. I don't know, maybe there would be more people who would like to hear from me more often, but I think 1 a week is a good compromise. So what's so special about a mailing list? there are so many good points to it. It allows people to get to know you better. So when someone joins my mailing list, they get a free gift of a free pattern, the Moroccan Dream Scarf. If you are signed up to my mailing list, it's fairly likely that you will have received this pattern for free. And that's just a little incentive and a little thank you that I can give to people for wanting to sign up to my mailing list. The mailing list helps people to get to know you better. When they know you better, then you can start to feel to them more like a friend in their inbox rather than someone who just sends them spammy stuff all the time. Because when you're selling your weaving or you have a business around your weaving, you're not just selling the product itself, you're selling ideas and you're selling inspiration and information. And the email list is a way that you can reach out to people and let them know you a little bit more intimately than they may know you, say, from social media, from your YouTube, or from wherever they heard about you. Another great thing about a mailing list is it belongs to you. So if you think about Facebook, Instagram, if you use other social media, those are my two that I use mostly, YouTube, Pinterest, whatever they all are, they can be taken away from you. Your YouTube channel can be just taken for no reason. It can be hacked and you may never get it back. Same with your Facebook page. This actually almost happened to me a few years ago. My Facebook page disappeared. Thankfully, it did return about a week later with no explanation. But these things do happen. They happen to people. And if you have worked really hard to build an audience and you might have 5,000 people following your Facebook page or your Instagram page or whatever it is, and then that's just gone, then you've got to start from scratch and build that up again. What a headache, what a disappointment. But with your mailing list, it belongs to you. So as long as the people who are on your mailing list want to remain on your list, and they have to be given an option to unsubscribe if they want to, that's the law. And anyone can do that at any time, so they don't have to be on your list. But if you have people on your list who want to be on your list, then you always have a way to get in touch with your people. And that's so important. I think of each email that I send out, it's almost like writing a letter to my friends, my weaving friends. One more tip that I have for you, if you start a mailing list, it is really great to have an incentive. So if you are selling your weaving, an incentive might be a 10% discount code if they purchase from you. But one thing I want to say about your mailing list is to not abuse the mailing list people. These are real people with real lives, and they've chosen to be on your list, and that's an honor. So what you want to do when you send them an email is provide them with value. Provide them with a reason why it was good for them to sign up for your list and good for them to remain on your list. Don't use your people as though you're a slimy salesperson. I know that sounds harsh, but it can come across that way to people if all you ever send out is emails about what you're selling. So if you have a look at one of my emails, and if you're not signed up to my mailing list, I'll leave the link down below. Even if you only want to sign up just to see what it is that I do. Of course, I'm not perfect, but it's always interesting to peer into what somebody else is doing. I try to have a mixture of interest. I try to make the emails educational, really valuable. I link to blog posts that I've written. I link to videos that I've written. I address problems that people have told me that they have, and I try to help them solve their problems through giving them information. I try to inspire people, and I do tell them, of course, I tell them about my new products, but I do it in a way that I hope is not salesy. This is something that I've actually struggled with over the years because I never liked talking about myself, and through running a business, I have been forced to do that an awful lot. I'm doing it right now. But the idea is that I'm not necessarily talking about myself. I'm sharing information that I know is going to help other people. Totally different to focusing on yourself and always talking about yourself. So that sharing of information is really important. And if you feel weird about that, if you feel like you are being salesy just by sending out emails to people, remember that people can only find out about you and what you do by you telling them. And remembering that has really helped me get over my discomfort over the years. So if you were selling pieces to weave, an example of a more informative, inspiring kind of email rather than just, look, I wove this beautiful scarf, do you want to buy it? Which doesn't really appeal to that many people, is you could talk about the fiber that you used. Okay, so this one's bamboo. I could research bamboo and go through the process and have some lovely pictures and make it a kind of short educational session. It doesn't need to be any huge thing. Or I could talk about my favorite part of the process of weaving this scarf and why. I could talk about the way it feels or the way it makes me feel when I wear it. Things like that. There's just so much more around an object and around a person that you can expand upon that will make an email more interesting. There are more things that I would like to talk about, like photography for your products and things like that. But this video is just going to be way too long, and I don't want to bore the socks off you. So again, if there are specific things that you want to know about, or if you want me to make more videos like this, I would love to share more of what I know. And I'm pretty passionate about helping people in business startups, especially weavers. So anything I can do to help people in that regard makes me happy. Okay, don't forget to check out the links down below. I'm even going to put in some links that I didn't mention specifically in this video, but that I think are really relevant. If you go down below and you can't see the links, click on little bold text that says more, and it has 3 dots after it. It's kind of difficult to see these days. It used to say show more, but now it just says more. But if you scroll down just under the video where there's text about the video and about my channel, you should see this little more word, and you can click on that, and then that will expand the menu down. You'll see all the links. If you are interested and ready to start a mailing list at this time, I'm also going to put a link to Convertkit down below. They have all different levels, tiers of plans, depending on how many people you have on the list. So check that out if you want to know more about them. Well, friends, I hope this was really helpful to you, and until next time, happy weaving.